Welcome to All Things Social Security. Enjoy your video. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I wanted to make a mention of representative payees and a particular issue with regard to that. There was a viewer who mistakenly, but seemingly firmly, believed that anyone who's a representative payee can charge the disabled person monies from their benefits or at all for being the representative payee. I think the person may have been mixing up representative payee, I hope this is what happened, with appointed representative. And yes, I think any appointed representative may be able to request a fee, which of course has to be improved in writing by the SSA, just like it does for attorneys and non-attorney representatives who are already working on behalf of claimants before the SSA. So even like an ad hoc friend or family member, potentially. However, that's appointed representation where they're doing all the work for the person. And they would put that on their 1696. There's a spot rate for it right there. And they would do a fee agreement, potentially. Or they would ask for to be able to do a fee petition later. Kind of weird if it's your family member. I don't know. I think it would be kind of strange. But, you know, if you're not in that kind of business, wouldn't you just be doing it as a loved one? But don't mix up appointed representative with representative payee. Under the rules, a representative payee, unless they are an institutional approved, SSA approved RP, representative payee, you cannot charge people to be the representative payees at all. So I have a link, and let me just give you the language that they give us. Yes. I'm going to read this to you because I just think it's really important. I'm concerned that if someone didn't think that they might be doing this, and I don't want to see anyone get in trouble for making the mistake of thinking this. It's not like the person knew it was illegal and did it anyway, thinking they're not going to get caught. They seem to really not know. So whatever the case may be, I just want to make it clear to everybody else. It is expressly under the website of the SSA.gov. The question, can I collect a fee for serving as a representative payee? And the SSA, I'm going to read this to you so you got it word by word, okay? No, unless you are a qualified organizational payee approved in writing by Social Security to collect a fee. They continue on to say, we never approve an individual to charge a fee for payee services. We never approve an individual to charge a fee for payee services. Capiche? We can allow some organizations to collect a fee from a beneficiary's monthly payment for providing payee services. An organization must apply and qualify under the law for fee collection. Social Security must approve the fee collection in writing. To qualify as a fee, quote, fee for service payee, an organization must be the following one, at least one of, and some of dual of the following. They must be a community-based nonprofit social service organization bonded and licensed in the state in which it serves as payee, or, and there's a bunch of continuous obligations under the or they must be a state or local government agency responsible for income maintenance, social service, healthcare, or fiduciary duties, and regularly serves as a payee for at least 5 beneficiaries, and not be a creditor of the beneficiary, but there are some exceptions that apply. And they must submit an SSA 445 application to collect a fee to us. And lastly, they must be authorized in writing by us to collect a fee. So they're either a community-based nonprofit social service organization bonded and licensed in the state in which it serves as payee, or it is a state or local government agency responsible for income maintenance and blah, blah, blah of the disabled person or the senior retired person, I suppose, that meets all those other things that I just mentioned. And going back to it specifically, we never approve an individual to charge a fee for payee services. Don't ever do that, guys. All right. I had no idea that was even a question. So, anywho, I hope that clears that up. All right. If you're going to be a representative payee, you don't make money from it. All righty. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day and week. And I will hopefully see you Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check the schedule there and see if we're on there for our live Q&A on all things Social Security. You can ask your questions in the chat, and I, thus far, have stuck it out to the end every single time, even when we went over the 2-hour soft maximum I have. Sometimes we've gone 2.5 hours. Sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes we'll only be going 1.5 hours. So it all depends on who shows up, what questions there are. And it's a real friendly, sweet group. Mostly those with pending claims. Sometimes they are family members, and sometimes oftentimes they are also beneficiaries already having succeeded in their claim, and they have some questions. It could be about going back to work while maintaining their, disability payments and following all the rules and all that. So it's a good time, guys. It's a really friendly crowd, and we have a good time. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hey, so if the subject matter of the video you just listened to is of interest and you want more on it, stay tuned. Here's another one about the same topic, but a little bit different. Bye now. Hey all, this is a little information about representative payees under the Social Security Administration and what their duties are. So you might find yourself being in the position where you are expected or being asked to be a representative payee for someone else who has prevailed on a Social Security disability or an SSI claim, or someone who was already receiving it, but now they suddenly need a representative payee. Generally, this is because the SSA has determined that the beneficiary can't handle his own funds. Oftentimes it's due to a mental limitation. Other times it could be physical if they really can't physically pay their bills. So it could be, obviously for a number of reasons. But in any event, let's just go over what the duties are of the representative payee. You're basically going to be in charge of the person's money. It's going to come to an account that you are on, and you are going to be in charge of making sure the bills get paid that the beneficiary has. And oftentimes the beneficiary is a family member. Sometimes it could be a very close friend, that kind of thing. The alternative the SSA has for beneficiaries who do not have someone they can trust to be representative payee are organizational representative payees, and they are approved by SSA, and that's a whole different thing, and they actually collect a small fee for doing that job. But for the rest of us who are doing it, for a loved one, there's no fee charging for that. That's just something you do. I'm not allowed to charge a fee. But in any way, there are required duties, and I'm just going to run through them here. They're actually online at the SSA website, so I'm going to link the article to you, or the write-up, I should say. And let's go through them. So the first thing you have to do is determine your beneficiary's needs and use his or her payments to meet those needs. So that would be housing, making sure the person's fed, basic bills are paid, all the survival things. Any money that's left over after meeting those current needs on a month-by-month basis, you're expected to save that money and put it in an interest-bearing account or savings bonds for the beneficiary's future needs. Because of course, a rainy day could come where he's going to have an additional expense, right? Could be medical, could be something else. You're supposed to report any changes or events that would affect the beneficiary's eligibility for payments. So this could include beneficiary passes away. If you ever watch the Friday Fraud Law Review segment, we go through kind of ad hoc some of the many convictions or charges or sentencings of people who have, taken control of others' monies and didn't quite use them the way they're supposed to, and didn't necessarily report when the person passed and kept the money coming in and using it for themselves. Keep in mind, a lot of the time, the representative payee is the parent of a child. Things are a little different when it's the parent of a child because the checks and balances are not quite the same, since the parent is tasked with the legal responsibility of providing for the child anyway. Okay, so other changes or events that you would be reporting if the beneficiary goes to work. Let's say he starts working full-time, part-time, anything. All that is, when we're beneficiaries, we're supposed to report that. You as a representative payee, I would think that if you learn of your beneficiary going to work, because that would potentially change, if he's on SSI, it's going to almost certainly change his benefit amount. SSD, it may also, and it'll also implicate trial work periods and whether he's SGA or not SGA, whether he has to have benefits withheld, or whether it's going to cease his benefits altogether. You want to keep records of all the payments you've received and how you spent and saved them. Generally, I think there's like an annual reporting, but you're going to want to make sure that you can account for all those monies, because if bills aren't being paid and the money's gone, then there's going to be a curiosity as to whether or not you are capable of doing your job, whether you took the money, what have you. And by the way, I think the incredible vast majority, if not nearly everyone who's a representative payee, is above board and does all the right things, but you have the occasional bad actor, right? Let's see. So when the SSA asks, this is upon request, when the SSA asks you for all those records, you're going to have it ready. So always I would keep your receipts, keep those. If you're paying with a debit card through a particular account, that would be a great receipt right there, because it's going to show where it's spent. But I would probably also just keep the receipts as well. Maybe you have a scanner, you could scan them in or keep them in a big box or something. You also need to report to the SSA if there's any changes that would affect your performance doing this really important job of continuing as the payee. That could be if you're having difficulties accomplishing, like maybe you are having difficulties paying your own bills on time. What's the chance of you being able to reliably pay the beneficiary's bills on time? Things of that nature, I think. You have to complete reports that accounts for your use of the payments as required. So again, the SSA might ask you for certain records. They also may ask you for the report. Now, historically, I always understood that it was kind of an annual report you're supposed to do anyway. So you're going to want to make sure what your SSA, how they're doing it now. Like, do they want you to every year just put it on your calendar and fill out the report, or wait for them to ask for it? And this is the part where you could be a little bit at risk. If something happens and unbeknownst to you, the beneficiary has an overpayment. Maybe there was, particularly with SSI, when those payments can be very changeable based on him getting a gift, inheriting something, and suddenly you have an overpayment. You can be on the hook for making sure the SSA gets paid back. So if you didn't realize there was an overpayment and you spent the money on the beneficiary for his needs, nothing untoward, nothing ill-intended on your part, and there's an overpayment, the SSA will generally go after you as well, because you're supposed to be all-knowing. So it's something you really have to stay on top of. Make sure that you know the rules of when that beneficiary, and again, this is going to be mostly SSI, when that beneficiary may be getting an overpayment. When a payment that he's been getting is not due him in the amount that it's being paid, because down the line, it's going to be learned that he inherited money, or he had a gambling win, or maybe went to work part-time and forgot to report the very low earnings that would slightly reduce his SSI. That stuff can really add up to a dandy overpayment, and that's not fun. So you definitely want to stay on top of it. When you stop being the representative payee for the beneficiary, if you ever do stop, any of the payments that have not yet been spent have to be returned to the SSA, so that then they can then forward it to either the beneficiary, if he's going to now be his own payee, like he can do it himself now, or to whoever will be the next payee if it's getting transferred to somebody else. The SSA reminds us too that a power of attorney does not make you the representative payee. Even if you have power of attorney over something with the beneficiary, you still have to apply to serve as the payee. And for the record also, the beneficiary, if he or she does not think he needs a representative payee, he can ask to not have one. So sometimes, I just had one the other day where the SSA wanted the new beneficiary to come into the office. I think they wanted to give him an eyeball because he doesn't want a representative payee, and they wanted to see if he appeared that he might not need one. I thought that was interesting that clerks at the SSA office can make that decision. But I mean, it does happen. It has to happen expeditiously. So I suppose that's the next best thing. If they hadn't felt that way, or they were still on the fence about it, he probably would have gone to his doctor and seen if his doctor, despite any mental or physical limitations he has, could he manage his own benefits. A person who has been managing their own bills anyway probably will be held to be able to continue to do that. So it might be under other circumstances where there's evidence that they can't do that or can't do it properly. Again, there's no fee you can charge if you are the representative payee. You're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. If you pay for something for the beneficiary, you can reimburse yourself for it. You're going to want to keep very good receipt on that, because obviously that's going to be under scrutiny, right? But sometimes, like, you know, you may have paid for something because you didn't have his debit card or whatever the case may be. It was just in the moment. You can certainly get reimbursed, but you're going to want to keep it documented. Show that you paid something out of your own monies, not out of the account that you've set up for his monies. And that's why you're then getting reimbursed. They also say here that you should obtain SSA approval before you use benefits to pay for other out-of-pocket expenses incurred on behalf of a beneficiary for other than current or reasonably foreseeable needs. So I would think the unforeseeable things that come up, you might want to, I mean, they say SSA approval. Sometimes, you don't have time for that, but I would be very overt about it after and make sure everything is transparent. Okay, let's see. Okay, you're going to want to generally set up a bank account. SSA thinks that the checking account is better in some ways because you will have canceled checks or statements that show how you spent the funds. And they remind you that if you're using a bank account for the beneficiary's funds, if he's on in some programs, as they say, you have to make sure that his balances, you're not, like if it's SSI, you can't keep super high balances, right? Because then he's going to be exceeding the resource limit. But at the same token, sometimes some checking accounts require a certain balance in order to not have to avoid service charges. So you're going to want to play that one carefully. You want to minimize the fees. So you want to have a bank account with low fees, because you're supposed to be there, remember, protecting his monies from silly fees. There might be some fees, but they do say that you should be seeking to minimize them. They encourage representative payees. So encourage doesn't sound like a mandate, but they encourage you to use an interest-bearing account. If it's Social Security disability where the person can save, if he doesn't spend all his money on his basic needs, and he's not a heavy spender otherwise, doesn't have a lot of maybe hobbies that cost money that you'll be spending his monies for him on, he could be accumulating quite a savings. Again, this wouldn't be the case for SSI, but SSD. And that's why you probably want to have an interest-bearing account so that his own money can earn him some interest, right? They also make clear that you must title the bank account so it is clear the money in the account belongs to the beneficiary. You can talk to the banks about that. They should be very familiar with these kind of, I don't even know what the word would be. I don't know if it's considered a custodial account. Not sure, but talk to the banks. Every bank does things a little differently, and make sure it's not just if you're Mary Jones and you're representative payee for Johnny Jones, you don't want the account to be purely Mary Jones, no other indication that it's Johnny Jones monies in there. And you do not want to put your own monies in that account. You do not want to commingle, in my opinion, your monies with the beneficiary's monies. Okay, because that's gonna make a little web of a mess. So they go on to say that the proper use of the benefits includes current needs. This would be food, clothing, shelter, utilities, dental and medical care, and personal comfort items. So it's not like they're supposed to be living in a prison cell with, 3 hots and a cot. There can be, allowance, a little spending maybe every week. And you also want to maybe hold some back if they have enough to save for reasonably foreseeable needs that might crop up in the future, little, emergency things. But outside of that, you're supposed to conserve or invest the benefits for the beneficiary. So all that extra that he may have that's above and beyond what he needs to live, you're going to want to save it and invest it in a secure manner so it can earn money for him.
They emphasize too that where the beneficiary has unmet current maintenance needs that aren't able to be met, saving benefits does not serve a purpose and would not be in his best interest. So if his monies are so low that he's barely scraping by in terms of survival, paying the rent, paying the utilities or whatever he's responsible for, don't be surprised if you're not going to be saving any and investing any. That's only where that shoe fits, where that would come in. A lot of people, I think, do not end up having a lot of savings just because Social Security disability is not all that much for most of us. So the bottom line is the use of the benefits is always in the best interest of the beneficiary and always using your best judgment. So combine those two things and you'll probably do just fine. They give some examples of what you cannot do. Being a payee representative payee does not give you the authority to sign legal documents other than Social Security documents related to that from the SSA. You don't have legal authority over earned income, pensions, or any income from sources other than the Social Security or the SSI. You can't use the beneficiary's money for your own personal expenses or to spend funds in a way that would leave that beneficiary without necessary items or services. So not only can you not use it for yourself, which should go without saying, right? But again, that Friday Fraud Law Review segment, we're always seeing people doing the exact opposite, and that's why they go to prison. But you also have to be careful how you spend the funds. So you can't be spending funds irresponsibly, even if it's for the beneficiary, if it's going to leave him without his necessary items that he needs, right? You can't put a beneficiary's Social Security or SSI monies, I think we mentioned this before, in your own account or in someone else's account. It's going to have to be in that dedicated account that we're talking about. And of course, when you're no longer the payee, let's say it's a child and he turns 18 and no longer needs a payee because he's an adult, you can't keep whatever's funds were saved. If there were some saved, you got to hand that over. And you also cannot charge the beneficiary, I mentioned this before, for services for being his representative payee. Again, unless authorized by the SSA to do so, and that would be those institutional organizations that jump through certain hoops and follow certain rules and get that authority from the SSA. There are some interesting questions they go on to talk about. What if the beneficiary wants you to spend money on things that do not meet your approval? What is your responsibility? The SSA says that, of course, and this is what we mentioned before, your main duty is to make sure that the current needs of the beneficiary are met. That is the main and foremost duty. Everything else is secondary. It's once you have met those needs that he or she has the right to some discretionary spending money. So that was where they give that a little allowance, even if you don't approve of all of his or her choices. So you're not like the parent, assuming this is an adult beneficiary. You're not his guardian per se. So you got to let him do some things that you might not buy with it if he wants to. Now, they do go on to say with drug or alcohol abuse, you may want to give him or her only small amounts of spending money. Makes sense, right? Or you can buy food rather than giving him the cash for the food. That's probably a good way of doing it sometimes. Instead of giving him $100 to go out and go shopping where he spends 50 and then the other 50 goes to God knows what, do an Instacart order or go out and buy yourself, right? If you think he or she is spending money on illegal or dangerous items and activities, they obviously encourage you to seek help from a social service agency that can help him or her. You can also ask for guidance from the local Social Security office or by calling that toll-free number that you hear from me all the time about other things. That's the one. Let's see. Yeah. So they talk about, I'm going to skip this one because it's about an institutionalized beneficiary, and I don't think that's going to be the most of you out there. So I don't want this to go on too much longer. This one would happen quite a bit, I think. How do I handle large sums of money, such as if they get a big back benefit check from SSA covering several months or even years? They reiterate the main thing to keep in mind is you must spend the money wisely and in the best interest of the beneficiary. Your priority is always to make sure you meet the beneficiary's current needs. That's the food, the shelter, the medical care, and the comfort items. After you provide those needs, you could spend the money on things that would improve living conditions or provide better medical care. You may also use leftover money to satisfy his or her debts. However, if you are a creditor, to the beneficiary, we must approve your use of money to pay any debt that he or she owes you. That's a good point. And of course, you have to save any remaining funds for him or her, always, right? They are reminding everybody, if this is an SSI situation, as you know, the SSI beneficiary cannot have more than $2,000 if single or $3,000 if married in countable resources in any given month. So you need to spend. So if you did get a big back benefit, you got 9 months to spend it. And as a rep payee, I would keep all of my receipts so that his resources are never going to be above 2,000 once that 9 months is up. If you don't spend the money within 9 months after the month of receipt, overpayment may occur, and that's because they're not going to be due the benefits while that's over. And benefits may stop if countable resources exceed the $2,000 threshold. Okay, these get all very detailed down here, so I'm not going to go through them. I just wanted to give you those basics of, as a representative payee, what you need to do and what you need to document to protect yourself, and of course, always to protect the beneficiary. Yeah, or else you could find, if you screw it up, I'd hate to see you, if you're, at the best of intentions, be stuck with an overpayment that you might have to pay back. Because if you're not careful and you spend all of the beneficiary's monies only to find out that he wasn't supposed to have received them, that will be the overpayment, and that could be a little sticky. There are things such as waivers and payment plans, so don't hesitate to use those if they apply to your situation to get out from under such a dilemma if that happens. They do happen quite a bit, actually, but not always, had nothing generally to do with the representative payee situation, just in general. A lot of SSI folks in particular get nailed with an overpayment just because of the way, particularly like the part-time working folks, because they forget that their benefit from this month is going to be reduced of what they should be getting due to any part-time work. And, months later, the SSA catches up with them. Now does the recalculation. We shouldn't have sent you the $914 in September of 2023. We should have sent you only $600. Now you have a $200 and something, $300 overpayment. And that could be multiple months of that happens. I mean, the overpayments can really grow pretty fast. So you want to be super careful. Okay, representative payees, you are invaluable, very necessary a lot of the time. And to those who need a representative payee or are being assigned one and don't think that they need one, there are steps you can take to show the SSA that you don't need one, that you are capable of handling your monies. So look into that if you need to. It happens a lot, the SSA is trying to be cautious, but they do recognize that, you can have some severe mental limitations, but they don't necessarily interfere with your ability to pay your bills, right? There's a ton of them. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye now.